And welcome to this webinar on how to use GMAT RC. I want to thank you guys for joining me today. I see there are about 60 odd people who are here in this session. So first things first, do let me know if the audio is going through loud and clear by commenting on the chat bar over there right next to you. Just as an introduction, my name is Rajat Siddhana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your main host today. Supporting me in this webinar, we have Harsha, who's joined using through the e-GMAT chat and through the e-GMAT channel, and he's going to answer any questions that you have. So let's get started with that. We have a fairly long session today, and so I want to make sure that we do justice to this. And with that, let me just share my screen over here, and we are up and going. So just to begin with, I mean, if you've seen any of my RC sessions, if you've seen the session that we did last week, this session is divided in two parts. The first part of the session is very similar. That's this part in which we set the foundation. The second part of the session, which is going to be about 70% of the session, is completely new and in which we're going to apply what we have learned in the first part. So first things first, and thank you very much, guys. Let's talk about how you approach reading comprehension today. So briefly, in the chat pod, tell me how you approach RC today, and then we'll go from there. All right, while I get that. And then also, add some comments such as, okay, how many of you do enjoy RC? If you don't enjoy RC, tell me why is it that you don't enjoy RC? What aspect of reading comprehension bothers you? And how many of you feel after you've read a passage, you've truly understood the intent with which the author has written a passage? And while you do that, let me just make sure that my platform's working absolutely fine at my end. It seems it is. Stop analysis. Okay, hello. Okay, spend lots of time reading the passage and little time answering questions as possible. That's Yashu's approach. That's good. Let's get a few more responses. Okay, so the other thing which you have is when you read the passage, and let me actually hide this. When you read a passage, what level of understanding do you think you have after you've read the passage before you start answering questions? So, I mean, rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 100, and you say, okay, 50%, 60%, 90%, 99%, or 100%, just as a show of hands, so that we can see, so we can get to know the level of understanding that you guys have. All right. 40%. Hard to get the main point as difficulty increases. Okay, 50, 60. Let's get more. I mean, what this does is it allows us to understand the makeup of this group as a whole, and then once you know the makeup of this group as a whole, we can personalize this webinar to your needs. 60, 70, 50. So we have that's group between 45 and 60 to 70. Ankit says it depends, and I think it does depend on the kind of passage that you face. All right. So my goal really is to get you from that 70% to that 90+% level of comprehension in this passage. Once you do that, answering questions becomes easy. Okay. The first thing we want to focus on is how do you extract the most from any passage that you have? How do you get the most out of it? And to do that, we're going to look at some reading strategies. There are about 7 that we focus on. 3 of them constitute the bulk of reading strategies that you apply. And so we're going to introduce those 3. We're going to learn how to apply those 3. That's going to be our sprint 1. Then we will use that information that we extract from the passage to answer questions. And the questions that we're going to put in are going to be interesting, and that's how I would really say. I mean, they would be difficult, but they won't be difficult because they're testing a nuance or they're testing something that's not very common. They'll be difficult because they're testing the crux of what GMAT RC is all about, and And so we're going to look at this and we're going to understand why you made a mistake, where you made a mistake, which core concepts do you lack when you make a mistake. And in this sprint one, we're going to do 2 questions. We're going to demonstrate that using a main point and an inference question. And then the learnings that we'll take, we're going to apply those to a full-length official RC passage over here. Okay. Now the sprint one, depending on how long it takes for you, should take about 20 minutes. The sprint 2 over here should take us about 40 minutes. And again, as always, I'm going to share forms in which you put in your answers so that we can then see the stats. Okay, but before we get started, I want to make sure that we do one thing. The passages I'm going to share with you, they're not going to be super long. They're going to be short, but they're going to be dense, which means that they will have sophisticated sentence structures. They may have a few words that may seem complex, but everything that you see over there, if you see a complicated word, if you read the passage, if you read the information around it, you should be able to infer the meaning of that word. So I want you to read the passage with the right attitude, that you want to truly get immersed in the passage, that you truly are interested in what the author has to say. Okay, we've talked about getting immersed. The second thing which I want to make sure you do is this piece called visualize. Visualization is a really important skill in both GMAT verbal and quant, and not just in the context of reading comprehension, but also in the context of sentence correction as well as critical reasoning. In fact, next week, week after next, we're going to do a couple of inference sessions for our students. And one of the skills that we're going to focus on, the reason why we're doing those sessions is because we want to build the skill of visualization, because the segment of students for whom those sessions are designed, they read statements, but they don't visualize them in their mind. As a result, they're not able to infer information out of it. So when you visualize, what's really important is you've got to understand why the author has written that statement. In critical reasoning or in reading comprehension, every sentence, every word that's there serves a certain purpose. You've got to understand that purpose. If you understand that purpose, you're going to find selecting the correct answer would become a lot easier. Okay. Now, with that, let's understand the 3 reading strategies that we will focus on. So the first reading strategy that we want to focus on is understanding sentence structure. How many of you, when you read a certain sentence while reading an RC passage, feel that you're lost, feel that you read something that you didn't understand? You couldn't understand what the hell was the author talking about. If you've been in that situation, then this strategy, understanding sentence structure, is going to be something that you're going to find very useful. Understanding sentence structure is about taking back that control that the RC passage takes from you. How do you do that control? The way you do that control is by breaking a sentence down into its various aspects and understanding those aspects. For those of you who attended Stacy's session on sentence correction, which was on Friday, you guys will see how we've taken a few sophisticated sentences and how we break them down into their constituent chunks. That is what we call as understanding sentence structure. And how do you do that? You don't read a passage in a single go. You break it down into these segments over there. Now, once you understand a sentence, you want to make sure that you make it easier for you. And the way to do this is to predict what the author is likely to say. And we're going to demonstrate this. So the way to predict what the author is likely to say is by understanding or by looking at keywords. Quite often, in an RC passage, the author would start a sentence with words although, with words such as although, with words such as on one hand, on the other hand, with words such as similarly, and so on and so forth. And these words are what we call as keywords. These keywords could go in, continuing the line of thought. These keywords could go in defense against weakness. These keywords could go in changing the line of thought or going in a completely different direction. These keywords could go in providing examples to substantiate what the author just said. if you know those keywords and if you know which keyword belongs to which group, even before you read what that long sentence has to say, you would know what it should be saying. And knowing that helps you understand and helps improve that comprehension quite a bit. So that's your second skill. The third skill is designed to prevent us from getting overwhelmed. So when you read a bunch of information, each one of you has a certain defined mental capacity. There are certain students who and you've got to know what that capacity is. So when you read information and you've been reading, and you find that your brain's getting overwhelmed, some pause, summarize, and one that act of writing things down uh, will, um, will help you will help you will prevent your brain from getting overwhelmed and will help you maintain that chain of thought as you go through the entire passage. And again, different people are different over here, but most of you are starting at a point where early on you'll have to take a lot of notes, and which is where you may have to summarize again and again and again. But as you continue to do this more and more, what you're going to really find is that that need to summarize, the need to pause and write down reduces. So if you go to our YouTube channel, you see a success story that we published a couple of hours back about a guy called Arjun. When he started learning GMAT RC, he had to pause within a passage about 5 times. By the time he took the test, he didn't need to pause. But it wasn't that he started from that point when he didn't need to pause. It was a journey. Go through that journey. Don't avoid that journey, because if you avoid that journey, that's when you get to that 30th percentile. All right. And again, you can really see where you apply this. Understanding sentence structure goes at sentence level, and the other things, go at paragraph level or within a paragraph. And as Mukund says, note taking slows me down. Yes, it does, but you're starting to learn first, not studying to ace the exam. If you're studying to ace the exam, then you should have already finished your learning. You should have developed your core skills. You should have developed your timing and so on and so forth. If you don't invest in developing your timing, then there's no point, taking the test or even taking mock tests. It's like, if you think of a company such as Tesla, the reason why it is where it is because it invested in developing the charging infrastructure. It invested in developing battery technology and multiple generations of battery technology, and it invested in developing induction motors. That investment has to happen up front. Without making that investment, you can't take mocks. Tesla didn't wake up one day and say, "Oh, we're going to make an electric car, by the way, which everyone's going to use, and which we're going to start selling from day one." No, they started selling their first car in '05, and they started selling mass market cars 2 years ago. So go through that journey. Don't avoid that journey. Avoiding that journey is a recipe for failure. And again, you will have to go through this slowly, and this will slow you down initially, but you will get high accuracy, and then the speed will come naturally. All right, with that, let's start with our questions. And again, I'm going to show a passage. I'm going to show a poll question over here, and please put in your answers just in the poll question. Now, the poll question does contain everything that you need, so you don't need to refer to the screen. But in case you do, the stuff will be there, but do not put in your answers over here. All right? It's about a minute to read the passage, and then about another minute and a half to answer questions. So here is the passage with the question. I'm going to pause myself. I'm going to take the camera off so that you can focus on answering the question. All right, another 30 seconds. Let's get those answers in. I have about 20 responses so far. Put in your responses now, guys. Last 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3. Put your responses in the poll, not over here. 2 and 1. Actually, let me just move this over here. Let me get the response, and we have about 89 responses. Let's go back. Wrong pen over here. So we have 89 responses. Let me just put in how you did, how you polled. We have one person who's chosen choice A, 24 who've chosen choice B, 11 have chosen choice C, and about 56, if I remember, have chosen choice D. So about 64% give or take over here. That's good. That's really good to know. And thank you for that amazing participation. Now we have about 104 responses as of yet. There's no choice E, sorry, it's choice D. So let's kind of look at this. And this is a very interesting question over here. So bordering on the extreme. So when you think about this word, you say bordering on the extreme. What is this piece over here? And look at bordering of these on extreme. It serves a purpose. It talks about first, when you look at this, you have to say who's saying that. The author is saying bordering on the extreme. One definition of ethnocentrism, let's call it EC, considers it a schismatic in-group out-group differentiation. So the author over here provides his opinion. He says, hey, there's an extreme definition bordering on the extreme. And what it also tells us is there's not just one view, that there are many views that are there on EC, or there are many definitions of EC. And one of the definition, which is an extreme definition, it's not the most balanced definition, considers it an in-group out-group differentiation in which certain things happen, in which internal cohesion, relative peace, solidarity, loyalty, and devotion to the in-group are correlated with the state of hostility towards outgroup, which are often perceived as subhuman and or incorporation of the evil. Okay, so when you think about this, you say, okay, it's a single sentence. The author in this sentence provides a definition, and he says that definition is an exaggerated definition. So Mukund, this is note taking, by the way, for me. And again, when you look at all of this piece over here, you don't have to remember this detail. You just have to get an idea of what this detail is. Why? Because remember this, GMAT reading comprehension is not designed to make you a subject matter expert. I mean, you're getting about 400 words on a topic. You cannot become a subject matter expert. But what it's designed to do is it's designed to teach you like a manager, or where you look at information, you draw inferences from that information. You understand the direction in which the author has written that, and you're able to draw inferences based on understanding the direction. You cannot, and I say you're not expected to, and you cannot be a subject matter expert. For example, if a passage were around whether life on Mars is sustainable, by reading an RC passage, you can't be an expert. What you can really say is, given what the author believes is to be true, here is what I can conclude. That's what you are expected to be. So when you look at a bunch of this detail, where one definition considers it a schismatic blah 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 differentiation in which these things are correlated with hostility towards outgroup. So this part, which is the underlying part, you should have an idea. But the key thing which is there is for you to understand and worry about is the fact that these things, and let me just put that in blue, are correlated with the state of hostility. This correlation is the key word over there. There are two things which are correlated, and these outgroups, the modifier over here, which are often perceived as subhuman or incorporation of evil. So there's an exaggerated definition of EC, and as per EC, there's some differentiation in which you have love for your own people and some sort of a hatred towards outside people. So if you were to take notes for this, in this single line paragraph, the author presents one definition of EC. He indicates that that definition is a bit exaggerated. That's an inference. Why? You can draw this from this. You can also draw an inference, which is that, hey, there could be more definitions. Why? Because it says one definition of this. And per this definition, the following are correlated. One is love for your own people, and the second is hatred for outside. Now, these are what I call as the most exhaustive set of notes that you would take. Some of you may need to take all of these, others may need to take only a few of these, but this is what you should have extracted from this. Just from a show of votes, how many of you were able to extract all of this from this definition? Okay. Now, I'm going to actually come back to this later on. So let's answer our questions over here. So what's the main purpose of the author, behind the author writing this paragraph? Choice A, clearly incorrect, only one person chose, talks about the author's written this paragraph to criticize a concept. We know the author doesn't criticize. He doesn't say EC is bad. And he says he provides a view on that definition, but he doesn't provide a view on EC as such. So this can't be right. Choice B talks about evaluation of a concept. What is evaluation? Evaluation is defining pros and cons of a concept. Now, does the author talk about these are the benefits of EC? These are the downsides of EC? No, EC he doesn't do that. So this choice is wrong as well. Choice C talks about, it says, to define the concept of EC, which leads to hierarchy among social groups. The author doesn't define the concept himself. Also, EC doesn't lead to hierarchy among social groups over there. Okay, there's no mention of hierarchy. Choice D, he says, to introduce which is our correct answer. So he says to introduce the concept of EC. He does introduce us to what EC is. He says there's one definition of EC over there, and he does present a view on that introduction, that this is an extreme definition. Okay, and he presents his view by saying it's bordering on an extreme, which makes it the correct answer choice. So with that, let's kind of go to our next question over here. This is Q2. Again, take away from this, make sure you read the passage slowly. Make sure you understand what is author's view and what is someone else's view. If you do that, you're going to be able to understand what's going on in the passage. All right, with that, we have question 2. Let me get in the poll for question 2. Over here is the poll for question 2. It should be popping up on your screen now. And here is question 2. I'm going to mute myself. I'm going to give you over 2 minutes to solve this question. All right, guys, focus on solving the first one first, and if you can solve both, that's great. You have to answer in the poll over here. So click on the poll. You have everything in the poll over here. Let's get some answers in there. Focus on solving both. All right, last 10 seconds. 3. Don't put your answers in there. 2. And 1. Let me get those responses there, and let me look at how you guys solved. Okay, for the first one, we have, sorry about that, wrong pen. I should keep this pen over here. I have 19 people choice A, 20 right now. I'm gonna actually just stop 22 over here, 3 over here, 41, and then 10 over here. So you can see it's a mixed bag. I mean, the most popular choice is about 40%, give or take, over here. So let's kind of look at this, and when I look at, and I'm going to show you an example. This passage is a classic case of where you've got to understand what the author intends to say. Or when author, an inference is something that the author would agree 100% with. If the author, and that's what an inference is, regardless of whether you're talking about an inference in CR or an inference in RC. Now, this is a question that I'm showing over here that you can answer in the chat pod. If the author says the color blue is considered to have a soothing effect on moods of people, what is it that you can draw as an inference from this? Can you draw 1, which is some people regard the color blue as soothing, or 2, which is the color blue is soothing? What would you infer? You can say 1 or 2, and we'd know what you're talking about. So let's see some answers. What can you infer? What would the author agree with? One or 2? Let's see some responses here. And let me go take a look at my YouTube. So I have 4 1s, 1, 2, multiple 1s, lots and lots of 1, very few 2s. So it's clearly the answer over here is 1. When the author says the color blue is considered to have a soothing effect, what the author is saying is some people consider it, but I may or may not agree with it. So you can't really say with 100% surety whether the color blue has a soothing effect on moods of people. And let me bring it over here so you guys can see me. If the author truly wanted to say the color blue has a soothing effect, so he would say the color blue, he would not really say is considered to be. Well, let me actually change my, he would not say it's considered to be, he would just say the color blue has a soothing effect on people. That's when it would be author's opinion. And that's really important to understand this distinction, because in GMAT RC, they will test this distinction again and again. Okay, so the piece that's correct in this case is this one over here. Choice B is wrong. All right, so with that in mind, let's kind of look at this. EC and its canonical variants are deemed to be. Deemed means considered to be intimately connected with XP. That's called xenophobia as XP. All right. So that's why I say are considered to be closely connected to XP, and then that's kind of where understanding sentence structure becomes really important. When you see this, a complex attitude system comes sentiment structure involving aversion, dislike, blah 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 blah. How many of you, when you read this sentence, you kind of were lost in this sentence? You say, "Man, this is complex." How many of you, when you read this, were you lost in this? Over here, and let me see your responses. How many of you, when you read this sentence, were lost in this? Okay, let's get this. Angad says he was. Let's see a few more. So this is what we call as a classical RC structure. In the first part over here, and the first part I'm going to just mark it with these two brackets, the author presents someone else's view. In the second part, which is a really important part, which is this part over here, a complex attitude comes sentiment structure involving blah, 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 blah. Yes, you should ignore it, but you should not ignore the structure of it, which is that in this first part, the author is presenting someone else's view. In this second part, and let me erase, the author presents his view. This definition, a complex attitude comes sentiment structure, is something that the author is telling you what xenophobia actually is. That's not someone else's view, that's author's view. Okay, so what is xenophobia or XP? A complex attitude system cum sentiment structure involving aversion, dislike, and antagonism vis-a-vis the strange or the alien and everything that the stranger or alien represents. Okay, some sociocultural anthropologists even considered XP and EC to be opposite sides of the same coin. Can someone tell me what's the purpose of this word even over here? What's the reason why the author is using the word even? Why did the author use the word even over here? Even considered XP and EC to opposite sides of the same coin, but a few voices have cautioned. But again, as a keyword over here, contrast, going in the opposite direction. But what's the value of this word even? I am, again, I'm not going to argue grammar over here, but what is even? What is it linking to? Okay, continuing from what? I am. Continuing from what? Going one step further. Yes. No, he's not saying he doesn't agree or he disagrees or agrees. What he's saying is that remember what's going on in the first line. In the first line, we really say EC and its variants are intimately connected with xenophobia. Okay, and then he says, hey, that's one piece that he says, and then he says, actually, there is this group of people called some sociocultural anthropologists. They believe that the connection is so strong, which is where the word even comes in. Even considered XP and EC to be opposite sides of the same coin, which means they're kind of the same thing. Okay, so he's continuing his chain of thought when he writes even over here. The author is not presenting his opinion. The author is purely presenting his facts. Do you guys understand why even is there? It's to continue the chain of the construction over here. And it says there is that group of people that kind of consider them to be so well connected. It's an extreme piece, yes. How connected XP and EC are. Let's call them XP and EC. Let's not spell them out. There are no brownie points to spelling them out. Okay, so this is that continuing chain of thought that's going on, and you can really see how beautifully structured RC passages are. But then a few voices have cautioned that this need not be the case. Okay, so this is where you see some people take that connection to an extreme, and where they call it, opposite side of the same coin. But A, there's this other group which says that this need not be the case. All right. Now, when you look at this part, what is this but referring to? Is this but over here, is it doubting A, which is this part over here, or is it doubting B, which is this even part over here? What is the scope of this part after but? A or B? Doubting A or doubting B? They're doubting B, right? They're saying, hey, they need not be that closely connected. The contradiction, but contradiction of what? Not of A, but of B. And that's really important to understand too. Again, small passage, so much information that needs to be extracted from it. Okay. All right, and which is where the summary is there. Now you guys say, a lot of people know but as contrast, but you've got to apply it to the right context. If you don't apply to the right context, you again make a mistake. And which is where A versus B is really important. Okay. So in this, what the author does is the author defines a new term called XP, and he says XP and EC are closely connected. Some experts think they're so closely connected that XP and EC can coexist, but some other experts think otherwise. All right, over here. Now, what's an inference? An inference is something which the author believes to be 100% true. That's always from the point of view of author. A correct inference cannot be something on which the author hasn't given any opinion, right? So if the author presents someone else's opinion, you can't infer that, right? It has to be the author's opinion. And then if there are facts presented in the in a passage, as in a CR argument, they are considered to be true. On the GMAT, the test would never ask you to question facts. Okay, so let's look at this. Here is the passage over here. XP and EC are facets of the same concept. A lot of people chose this answer choice, and let me again get my stats over here. We got 113 responses over here, and 23 of you chose this answer choice. My question is, does the author agree with this? No, they're deemed to be, they're considered to be. The author is not saying that they actually are. All right, this is the view of some experts. This is not the author's view. Okay, the author does not either agree with this view or disagree with this view. So we cannot say with 100% certainty that this indeed is the correct answer. For those of you who chose this, do you now understand why this is incorrect? Okay. Similarly, choice B says the canonical variants of EC are closely connected with xenophobia. Again, this is a deemed view. The author doesn't agree or disagree with this. We cannot infer that over here. I mean, imagine this. If you were a bot, you were reading this and you had to really make that conclusion as to whether they're closely connected with one another based on the fact that some experts say this and the other experts say this, you would not be able to say that with 100% certainty, right? Or let me just take a very different, all right, people are getting, that's good. I'm not going to spend more time on it. Again, this part, as I said, the author doesn't agree or disagree with this view. In some cases, X could cause EC. That's wrong as well. Why? Because there's no cause-effect relationship that's put in place. Choice E, which is my correct answer, is xenophobia entails dislike towards the strange. How do we get with this? We get this from this standpoint over here. It says a complex blah, blah, blah. This is something that the author is telling you. This is what it is. This is what the author is telling you is this is what XP is. The author agrees with it. You can infer this from the information that is presented over here. Now, 27 of you chose choice B. I think my choices B and C are messed up over here. So 27 of you chose choice E over here. So which is good, about 27% of you got this answer. So if you chose choice B, which is in my presentation, my apologies guys, choice E, so you got it right over there. I'm just looking at this over here. So with that, I'm not done with the first phase of my webinar. I'm not going to discuss the second question yet. I'm going to discuss the second question after the sprint. Now we are going into a single passage sprint over here. We're going to do a full length passage, and I'm going to give you a form that has the full length passage. I'm going to give you 10 minutes. But whatever you've learned over here, I want you to apply that to that full length passage. Let me just make sure my form's correct. I think it should be, but let's just make sure over here. Yep, it seems 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, I have. This passage has 5 questions. Let me just paste this over here. I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to do this, so you'll get ample time. And you can read the passage over here, but you don't need to. Every question has the passage embedded in it. So you can literally read the passage in the question statement itself. So yeah, so every question has a passage. Let's get to it, guys. 10 minutes. I'm gonna hide my webcam and mute myself. You guys should be at least at question number 1, guys. So just want to kind of make sure that you are following along. All right, last 30 seconds, guys. Let's get those answers in. We are almost done. You guys should be on the last question. Let's start getting those answers in here as soon as possible. Okay, I am in the last 10 seconds countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, we have those answers. So how did this passage seem like after going through a bunch of those passages? Actually, I don't need the headset. I'm not using my headset. So how did this passage seem? And let's make sure I have you over here. So how was it? How did this feel over here? And I can tell you, I mean, there were questions where the accuracy went as high as 75%. So you guys did, many of you did really well. So that's I mean, incredible. Easiest passage ever? No, this was a 700 level passage if you look at stats on GMAT Club. So this is definitely not an easy passage, especially the answers over there. So, but I mean, when I look at the number of questions you got right, the 75%, definitely I can really say that. So for this group, it's a medium passage, but this is an official passage, so there are good stats for it, and it's considered to be a 700 level passage over here. So with that, let's analyze this passage. Let's go through the reading strategies. Let's see what is it that we still have to learn over here. FNM assert that medical research could be improved by a move towards larger, simpler clinical trials of medical treatment. So there's something that's supposed to happen. Medical research can be improved by doing larger and simpler trials. Currently, researchers collect far more information on patients than is strictly required. So this is the current practice. You have a keyword. This is another keyword they assert, which means the author doesn't say that, but it's as per FNM. And currently, researchers, what they do, they collect way more information than is required. How much more? Which is where the dash comes in, substantially more than hospitals collect. Thereby, another keyword which talks about outcome. Okay. Thereby escalating the cost of blah, 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 data collection, storage, and analysis. Then the author has this word called although. What's the purpose of although? Although limit, it's talking about a contrast. And we think about the role that this statement plays. It's the classical defense against weakener that you see in a CR passage. Although limiting information collection could increase the risk of that researchers will overlook facts relevant to the study, all right, FNM contend that such risk, never entirely eliminable from research, would still be small in most cases, all right? So the author says, although this might happen, and this is where I think you've got to read it from the point of view of the author, although limiting information could increase the risk that researchers would overlook fact, that is a risk which the author sees. He says, as per FNM, that such risk is never entirely eliminable, and it's going to be small in most cases. And then he says only is a really important keyword again. Only always leads to very interesting inferences. Why? Because when you use only, when you use best, when you use superlatives, and only is not the classical superlative, but it has that segmentation impact that when you use only with a group, it means that you can infer something about another group as well. Only people who scored in the 90th percentile in reading comprehension score 750 on the GMAT. What you can really say is if you don't score 90th percentile, you're not going to score 750 on the GMAT. So only has that segmentation impact. Only in research on entirely new treatments are new and unexpected variables expected to arise. So what the author is saying is, hey, you can limit information collection, you can go towards larger, simpler clinical trials, and this is the current scenario which is there, where there's too much data collected, and you compare them against the amount of data that hospitals collect to really show how much data, and this includes cost. And yes, there's a negative of collecting, or downside of collecting less data, but that downside, even when you collect all of this data, exists only in one scenario, which is a very specific scenario where these new and unexpected variables are likely to arise. So essentially, if you were to summarize this entire paragraph, you have benefits of simpler trials that have been explained. Then we go to the second paragraph, and then we say, okay, FNM propose that not only that research limit data collection, but also that, and you can see you have a parallel sentence. There's a that over here, there's another that over here, that researchers enroll more patients in clinical trials. So there's a second proposal that's coming in over here. You also see the word not only but also, which is continuing chain of thought. You have these keywords as well, and if you know these keywords, you're going to see them again and again. You're going to be able to identify, hey, continuing chain of thought. There's a second suggestion that's there, thereby again an outcome, obtaining a more representative sample of the total population with this disease and the study. So as an outcome of this, you get a much more representative sample. Then the author says, often researchers restrict study participation to patients who have no ailments besides those being studied. So what's the purpose of this line? It just shows how the studies are conducted today. A treatment judged successful under these conditions can then as a timing keyword. So it's saying, hey, first this is done, and then this can then be evaluated under normal conditions. So the second proposal that's there, which is, hey, increase the size of the trial. Why? As an outcome of that, thereby keyword, you get a more representative sample. This currently, you have the selective group where patients have only one disease, and this is what he calls as ideal conditions, the author calls them, and treatments that actually pass this disease under ideal conditions are then treated under normal conditions. So essentially, when you look at this, what are we saying? We're talking about benefits of a larger trial. Then broadening the range of trial participants, FMM suggests, would enable researchers to evaluate a treatment's efficacy for diverse patients under various conditions and to evaluate its effectiveness for different patient subgroups. So this is another benefit of this. Now there are two words over here which I use. One is efficacy and effectiveness. Why does the author use two words? Again, you probably are not required to know this, but given how common medical contexts are, I think it's important. What's the difference? But in the medical context, what's the difference between efficacy and effectiveness? Or in general, efficacy and effectiveness, what's the difference? What's the difference in efficacy and effectiveness? All right, let's see if I get responses. Efficacy and effectiveness. What's the difference? Efficacy is about, the results which are in a controlled environment. Effectiveness happens in the real world. Okay, and then the author really gives an example. He says, for example, the value of a treatment for a progressive disease, he says, talks about one kind of disease, may vary according to the patient's stage of disease. Then he says another thing that could impact is patients' ages may also impact a treatment's efficacy. Guys, could you please stop jumping if you're here? Then because there are here folks who are here to learn. Why do we need to know efficacy versus effectiveness? Not in this context, but as I said, given how common medical passages are, it's a term that you need to know. I think it's important to know this. On the GMAT, there are very few things they expect you to know, but there are certain things that come up in official passages that I would recommend that that you kind of learn over there. Okay, and there's a reason why they use the term efficacy and effectiveness over there, and you can see it's a list, and to evaluate A for diverse patients, and then to evaluate its effectiveness for different patient subgroups. And this is where you can read through a passage, or you can really say, I'm going to study a passage and understand this. So what's the proposal? Increase the size of trial. Why? Because you can, when doing that, you enroll more patients, and you're able to judge the efficacy of a treatment for different subgroups. And there are two examples that are given over here. Okay, and the inference really is, if you do this, you may not need that two-stage effort that is needed over here. All right. So if you look at the main point, what's going on? There are two proposals that are given, that are described. One is collect less data. The second is to obtain a larger trial, to obtain a more representative group of people to to join the trial. Let's get to first question, which is the main point of the passage. Before you go there, does the author support FNM suggestions? We don't know that. We don't know that. There's no evidence that the author supports. There's no evidence that the author goes against it. The author is not saying we should definitely do this. Remember, the first line says FNM assert. Okay, so when you look at and you do your pre-thinking, you really say, okay, what's going on in this passage? There's a proposal to improve medical research. How? First of all, by doing a simpler trial, and the second is by doing a larger trial. So essentially, if you were to pre-think, what you would say is the two proposals that are there that to improve medical trials or medical research that are explained in this passage. That's what you would go and look at answer choices. So let's look at answer choice over here. Choice A is here, identifying two practices in medical research that may affect the accuracy of trial. There are two practices that I explained, but we do not talk about the accuracy of clinical trials, and hence I'm going to do this. Choice B says describing aspects of medical research that tend to drive up costs. Now, in this passage, in first paragraph, there's one aspect that is described over there, but not all aspects, and it's only done in paragraph 1. So this is what I call as classical partial scope answer choice. Some people might choose it because it's described over there, but not all. Choice C, evaluating and analysis of certain shortcomings of current medical research practices. Now, this is what I call as a complex, an answer choice that's worded in a fairly complex manner. Why? Because it's a 3D answer choice. Evaluating what? An analysis of certain shortcomings. So we need to know, okay, are there certain shortcomings that we know of medical research practices? Maybe. Is there an analysis done? Not really. Are we evaluating the pros and cons of those? No, we're not doing that. So this, which is what makes this answer choice incorrect. All right. Choice D, which is my correct answer, is describing proposed changes to the ways in which clinical trials are conducted. This is what the author is doing. He's saying he's describing the proposed changes. It's not author's proposal, so it's FNM's proposal. So they're proposed changes to the ways in which clinical trials are conducted. Again, the author isn't presenting his opinion on it. He's simply saying this is what FNM are proposing. Choice E, and let's kind of see how people polled in this one over here. On this, we have 50 responses. Choice C was very popular. Choice E was popular as well, barring the original answer choice. And explaining how medical researchers have traditionally conducted clinical trials and how such trials are likely to change. We don't know if they're likely to change. Yes, there are some aspects that are discussed, but not all aspects of how medical researchers have traditionally conducted trials. Let me use the keyboard. All right. So because of which choice E is also wrong. All right. Let's look at our second answer choice. Second answer choice says, yes, it's clearly D. Most of you caught it. That's good. Those of you who did not get it, understand why and where you made a mistake. So question 2 says, is an inference question. What can be inferred from the passage about a study of category of patients referred to in the lines as often researchers restrict study participation to patients with no ailments besides those being studied? Okay, so essentially, what can be inferred about these studies? That's what the author is asking, and let's kind of look at this. So there are two things which can be inferred. Hey, one is that the results are limiting. Why? Because that's why you need to really do a two-stage study, and they cover ideal conditions. All right, so those are the two things that you have, and which leads to which answer choice? Let's see how you guys polled on this one over here. Choice B. Yeah, most of you chose the correct one, which is choice A. that its findings would have limited applicability. That's the correct one. Expensive past, we have in this context, there's no mention of expense. Let's look at the other incorrect answer choices that you guys have said over here in this context. Choice D is the most popular incorrect answer choice here. So choice D, what does it do? It would allow researchers to limit information collection without increasing the risk that important variables could be overlooked. That's talked about in paragraph 1. That's not talked about in this context over here. This is where if you choose this, you are mixing two things. All right. Choice C is just the opposite. Choice E again mixes this. This progressive versus non-progressive diseases is given as an example where if you include a larger variety of patients, what would be the benefit of that? Not in the case of where you include a smaller variety of patients or patients who only have this disease, or not for a test which is done or a trial that's done under ideal conditions. Again, knowing the context is really important. About 65% of you chose choice A, which is the correct answer, as you can see, and you guys can see this over here as well. All right. Choice C, and let's look at how we did in choice C over here. Choice C was interesting. A lot of people got choice C correct. About 80% of you got choice C correct. What choice C is saying is, what would be the benefit of what would be the advantage of a study that in which researchers restrict study participation to patients who only have those ailments that are being studied, who have no other ailments besides those being studied. Okay, and again, what's the benefit of those? When you look at this, often researchers restrict study participation to patients with no ailments besides those being studied. A treatment judged under those conditions can then be evaluated under normal conditions. So in the given way, you only have patients who have this particular ailment. In the proposed way, you include a much greater variety of participants who have different kinds of ailments, essentially, which means you have to account for more variables. All right. So, which is actually choice C over here. Hold on. How did you guys do? I think I read it wrong. If I know this, yeah, choice C is 40. That's good. Yes. So, but 80% of you chose this. This is my correct answer. It would yield more data and findings would be more accurate. That's just the opposite. Why? Because the larger the trial would yield more data. The larger trial in a single go would likely have more accurate findings over there. Choice B says it would cost less. We don't talk about cost in this context. Choice C is our correct answer. Yes. Why? Because you're only limiting our study to patients who have these conditions. So there are other variables that we're not going to study. Choice D really says it would help researchers to identify subgroups of patients with secondary conditions. Again, that's not the advantage of this study. That is the advantage of the proposed study. Again, you can see how the test taker the test maker is mixing facts from one context to the other. And if you read the passage carefully, you would not mix that. Experimental treatment, again, not studied over here. All right, let's look at question 4. Question 4 says, why does the author mention a patient's ages may also affect a treatment's efficacy? What's the purpose of it? The purpose of it is to give an example of how when you look at larger trial, you're able to get more insights out of it. Let's see how you guys polled on this one. Question number 4 over here. Again, this is an example, illustrate a point. You guys did really well. Close to 80% did this. Choice C, those who chose choice D in the previous question chose choice C over here is what I can see. Why? Because you're again mixing the progressive disease versus a non-progressive disease in this case. Whereas people who got choice C correct in the prior one also got this. Sayan, because that's a great question. Sayan's question is, why are we considering the variables in this question or in the previous question? Because this question considers the study with a limited number of variables. The prior question considered the study with larger variables. And the question is, what is the advantage of study in which you only enroll an ideal set of patients? And over this, what's that one advantage that you think it would have? And the one advantage that it would have is you'd have to analyze fewer variables. Does that help, Sayan? All right, this is our correct. And you can see how many of these are opposite over here. Okay. Choice B, for example, talks about casting a doubt, whereas the purpose of this is to substantiate enrolling a wider array of patients. And substantiating an argument, which is again choice B and choice C logically are the same, they're just written in different forms, is really saying substantiating an argument about the problems inherent in enrolling a large number of patients. No, we are trying to really substantiate the benefit of doing that. Okay. Choice question 5. All right, so far questions 1 to 4. Are we good? You guys are doing really well. I mean, after the first 2 questions, second question is where you had 25% accuracy, but after that, you guys are doing really well, or you've done very well. And yes, always read the question. Okay. This is what I call as a generic detail question. Okay. So why? Because there's no specific pointing as to what we have to look for. It says, according to the passage, which of the following describes an outcome, a result of the way in which researchers generally conduct clinical trials. So generally conduct means this is not the proposed way, this is the traditional way of conducting clinical trials. All right, when you look at this, there are 2 things that is there. Hey, one is you have a lot more data that's collected, costs are more. The second is the trials today are conducted in ideal conditions, so their applicability in real life is limited, or you can say you need a 2-step trial. Okay. So let's look at how you guys polled in this particular one over here. But 35% of you chose choice C, 33% of you chose choice A, and then choice B is popular, choice E is popular. So I'm going to start with choice C, which is an incorrect answer choice, but it's the most popular choice. Choice C says they avoid the risk of overlooking variables that might affect their findings, even though doing so raises their research cost. Do they really avoid the risk? Actually, they don't avoid the risk. Choice A is our correct answer, by the way. The risk exists even in their way of doing things. According to the author in the passage, yes, there is risk when you limit variables, but then the author says the risk never entirely eliminable. In the passage, if you remember, the author uses the word never. Is never entirely eliminable. So they do not avoid this risk, which is why choice C is wrong. All right. Choice A, they sometimes compromise the accuracy of their findings. Traditional way, there's no mention of them compromising the accuracy of findings by collecting, analyzing more information. No, that's not mentioned at all. Accuracy is not discussed. Choice D is worded in a cause and effect form. Because they attempt to analyze too much information, it combines information from paragraph 1 into paragraph 2. They overlook facts that could emerge as relevant to the studies. Paragraph 2 really talks about the fact that, hey, they're enrolling an ideal set of patients. They're not overlooking facts. They're just not considering. Remember, what's the difference between overlooking and not considering? What's overlooking and not considering? What's the difference between overlook? When you overlook something, this means you can look at it, you have the power to see it, it's there in front of you, but you choose not to take a look at it. In this case, the way they're doing it, they're saying, we're going to first go through the ideal scenario, and then we're going to do the second step. All right. So in that first step, they're not even considering that. All right. And there is no cause and effect between analyzing too much information and overlooking. Because of this, choice D is there. And as Angad says, overlook is you know, but you ignore. Okay. Choice E actually goes too far. In order to approximate the conditions typical of medical treatment, they base their methods. So again, in order to talks about purpose, their purpose is not to approximate the conditions of medical treatment. That's not the reason. And by the way, they don't base their methods on information collection that's used by hospitals. They collect more information. All right. Their methods may not be there. Choice A, which is a correct resource, they expend resources on storage of information likely to be irrelevant in the study. Yes, they collect more information than is needed, which is what the author says, and the passage says as well, and is our correct answer. Okay. All right. So you guys said, many of you said you're at 60-65% when it comes to comprehending the passage. The last passage that you did, most of you, I think they got to about 80 to 90%. Why do you think that happened? Why do you think most of you got that to 80 to 90%? And what this proves is, I mean, you can get to that 80 to 90%. It's not that you don't have that ability. It's just that you're not following the right process. Okay. So, I mean, this is something that we talk about. If you want to get to 7, if you're taking the GMAT, if you're here, make sure you get to that 730 or higher score. Why? Because, hey, top schools now need it. If you need scholarship, which I'm sure most of you do. I had a full fellowship when I did my MBA. A good chunk of this 350 million that B schools offer go to students who get to that 730 plus. And the third reason is the delta in total earnings. But the thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that you don't speed up. The way to master GMAT RC is by reading slowly. One of you over here said that you guys were you got started 2 minutes later because you wanted us to simulate reading slowly, and that's okay. That's okay. But as long as you focus on comprehending the passage, and the way you comprehend the passage is by making sure that you follow the keywords. If you follow the keywords, you're going to find that that comprehension becomes easy. You're going to find that you're going to be able to answer questions very quickly. And some of you might really say, wait a minute, read slowly on a time test? I mean, not many people say that. However, if you don't read slowly, if you don't comprehend, you're not going to get to that 90th percentile. You might finish the test. You're not going to get the score you need. On the other hand, if you read slowly, you're going to solve questions fast. You're going to be able to finish the test, and you're going to be able to answer more questions correctly. If you look at and go to GMAT Club, look at how many reviews we've had in the last 1 month, in the last 2 months. Compare that to the number of reviews that other prep companies have had. If you look at the kind of improvement that we've delivered, if you look at the recommendations made by those people, you're going to really see this again and again. All right. And as Rahul says, master comprehension. That's great. It's a course that we offer as a part of this. But let's talk about 2 ways in which you can do GMAT RC. One is you do speed reading. What are you going to do? Going to read a passage in about 2 minutes. Because you don't comprehend, what's going to happen is you're going to take about a minute and a half to almost 2 minutes to answer questions. In the end, you might end up taking, if you have 4 questions here, you might end up taking 8 to 9 minutes or even 10 minutes to answer questions. You might not get very many questions right. Again, you're spending about 25% of your time reading the passage. If you read the passage slowly, remember an RC is between 350 to 420 words. It's not a long passage. Probably take 3.5 minutes to read the passage. Because you've read that passage, because you comprehended, because you made some notes, you're going to find you're going to be able to answer questions very quickly. Okay. There may be passages which are on unfamiliar topics that you resent. And in that case, it's okay to even spend 4 minutes on reading the passage. Do not rush through the passage. If you feel an information overload, slow down, modulate your reading speed. Why? Because that's the only way you're going to be able to answer questions. And then the beauty of passages that seem overly complex is questions over there are not that complex. Okay. Again, for different people, this and this could be for different passages. For certain people who have a science background, they might be able to read very long science passages in 3 minutes because they have that context. So people who are from a humanities background, they may be able to read humanities passages in 3 minutes. Why? Because they have that context. Okay. So the idea really is don't time yourself or don't read for time, read for comprehension, and let timing be an outcome. As you read for comprehension, what's going to happen is you're going to find you get much better with regards to sentence structures. And as you get much better with regards to sentence structures, your reading speed increases automatically. Your ability to comprehend, your ability to retain, all these 3 things increase simultaneously. When that happens, the time to read automatically comes down. I mean, in this case, you saw in the first 2 passages that we did, right? In the first 2 passages, we had longer sentences. You had to slow down to comprehend. But once you understood those constructs, doing the official passage was a lot faster. Why? Because it has shorter sentences. You were familiar with some of the constructs over there. You knew how to read from the point of view of what the author is saying versus what someone else is saying. Rahul says, shall we take note of the tone of para and main idea of each passage? Rahul, again, what is tone? Ask yourself, what is tone? Tone is a form of author's opinion, right? If you think about it, and if you're taking note of author's opinion, you're already taking note of that tone. But the first thing you have to figure out is, okay, you have this piece of information over here. Which are the snippets that the author believes in? Which are the snippets that the author doesn't believe in, and where he's merely presenting information? As you do that, you automatically take note of the tone. Again, and this is where you have to ask yourself, why is it that I'm doing certain things? I mean, you see many experts suggest many things. The question is, what's the benefit of that suggestion? Why? And the key thing that you've got to figure out is, what does the author believe in? Where he's presenting his own opinion versus where is it that he's merely presenting facts? GRERCs. I don't like GRERCs. Again, you may have seen some success stories that happened because of GRERCs or even LSAT RCs, but trust me, they are not the same as GMAT RCs. It's like, hey, if you go to a gym and if you work out, in general be better in sports. But then, is that the best way, or is that a good way to get better in sports? Probably not. Why? Because if you're going to play soccer, you've got to strengthen your heart, you've got to strengthen your legs. The upper body, not so much. It doesn't matter a whole lot. You may go to the gym, you may work out, but if you don't focus on the right areas, if you don't focus on shock treatment for your legs, you might not hit better. I've seen bodybuilders who play soccer and they are from the worst soccer players. So again, make sure you're doing practicing for the right reason. If you want to really say, hey, I'm going to do a GRE passage because I'm weak in humanities and it allows me to get an introduction to to those kind of passages, then maybe yes, it does serve a purpose. But then in that case, why would you not, read The Economist or solve more passages of that type on the e-GMAT platform where we have close to 200 passages, or on GMAT Club by using passage type. And this is ample practice out there. The downside, in my opinion, of GRE passages is the kind of questions they ask. They're not the same as the kind of questions that the GMAT asks over there. But bottom line, focus on comprehension. You're going to find answering questions becomes a lot easier. And here's some examples. It's one of her former students, Anastasia. She improved her score to 740. She said that, hey, you should read all the text, not just the first and the last sentence. As long as you understand the whole paragraph, it takes very little time. In her case, it was 30 to 50 seconds to answer each question. And then she says, the more you read, the greater skill, which is where Economist, in my opinion, is one of the best journals out there. Over there. The key thing is, when you're reading, read to understand. Do not read for speed. Analyze every part of the information and understand the purpose. When you say why it is given, the purpose it serves. And again, as you say, read it with the SC or even the CR hat. There's a guy who's a Columbia student. Actually, she was a Columbia MIM. He's a Columbia MBA. And he emphasizes this guy took the GMAT multiple times. He was able to succeed in his last attempt. And he says, don't stress about timing. He stressed about timing in his initial attempts, wasn't able to succeed. He stopped stressing about timing, got to that score of 740, got multiple fellowships, including a few full fellowships. And again, you can see the timing recommendation over here. Okay. His debrief over the last 3 years is probably one of the most popular debriefs on GMAT Club. And again, he has his ESR over here. You can see his time to answer an RC question is a flat 2 minutes over here, which is 8 minutes per passage. This guy is someone who scored a V41, if I remember correctly. There's a guy who improved his name is Dr. Rohit Singh Malan. He improved his GMAT score from 690 to 760. And he talks about his before and after. When he had a V27, he says, in case of RC, I was forced to read the passage multiple times because he didn't understand the passage the first time around. When he got a V41, he basically said this. So how do you go about doing this? The first thing is learn how to strategically pause and understand how a sentence is built. How do you deconstruct a long sentence to understand its meaning, and just have those basics in place. The second thing is understand where you need to pause to be able to deconstruct over there. Then make sure you understand how to read a passage. You now know how to read a sentence from master comprehension. Then know how to read a passage using keywords, something that we applied over here. And then from there on, understand the key points. How do you get to the main point? How do you get to inferences, detail, and structure questions? If you've gone through the main point concept, which is on the e-GMAT platform, I want to ask how many of you have spent more than 30 minutes on that? It's people who score that 90th percentile analyze each and every answer choice. They're not just happy with saying, hey, we are happy, we got the answer right, we are happy. They want to make sure they get the answer right for the right reasons. Okay. Then make sure you learn each and every concept and each and every application properly. And only then you go and practice questions. In this learning phase over here, spend time analyzing a passage. Don't get done with it in 10 minutes. No, you are in that learning phase. You're in that information absorption phase. So do that. Okay. Start timing yourself when you're solving questions in Scholaranium or when you're post that learning phase, not before that. This is, by the way, for Rohit Malan, the guy who scored a 760. You can see once he got over the practice, the learning phase, he only had to go through about 15 passages to get to that point. You can see his average time correct for different question types. And you can see where he did not know stuff, he took longer. which is kind of natural over here. Again, if you don't comprehend well, you take longer. If you do comprehend well, it's a lot faster. This includes the time involved to read the passage, by the way. So that's averaged out over here. With that, do these things. Get immersed in the passage, visualize information as you're reading, visualize what the author is saying, what the author is mentioning, predict what the author is going to say by using keywords over here, and understand where you're faltering. Use this data to define where you need to put in effort when it comes to, and what kind of effort. Is it learning or is it practice? If you do this, acing the GMAT is a very predictable process. If you don't do this, you would end up doing zigzag, and you'll kind of find that, hey, my scores kind of more or less being the same rather than increasing like this. If you need help acing the GMAT, write to me at rajat@e-gmat.com, and we'd be happy to help you get there. With that, guys, I want to thank you for joining me today. Do let me know if you have any questions that I can still answer. And by the way, if you like this, it'd be great if you can like the video as well. If not, I want to thank you guys for joining me today. But if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take those. Yes, I actually forgot how to. Let me just do one thing and hide. This is good. Well, thank you guys. What's Scholar Name? Scholar Name is an e-GMAT platform that has practice questions over there. It's probably the world's most used analytics platform when it comes to GMAT questions. There's upwards of 2,500 GMAT questions that have been created by e-GMAT experts. All right, guys. With that, I want to thank you for joining me today. And if you want to, read a bit more about a few of the success stories, I'd be happy to share some links. Here's where you can go and read Rohit's success story over here. And here's the PDF. I think this is that you can download as well. All right. If you have limited time to prepare for the test and verbal is your main problem, what advice would I give? The first thing I would really say is take a mock test that tells you your ability scores if you've not done that. If you know your ability scores, then we can then help you create a study plan from there. So take this mock test. It gives you your ability scores. It gives you an ESR-like report, and then that way, from there on, we can help strategize this. If you know your ability scores, then let us know. We can do that. Again, you can reach out to me at rajat@e-gmat.com. Let me, it's already, Abhijit is already showing that. That is good. What is the expected accuracy for the passage? For this passage, I would have guessed about 60%, but you guys did way better than that. Approximately how many RC passages should you cover before your first mock? Don't think that's the right question, in my opinion. And let's say there's a minimum number, which is about 8 to 9. But for different people, that answer could be different. I think the right question is the way I would answer it is to really say till you hit about 70th percentile. Do not take a mock before you hit 70th percentile ability in RC. So some people may need about 25 passages to get there. Others may need about 7 to 8. It just depends on your starting point. Hopefully that helps, Angad. And again, even before you take that mock, one of the things that's really important is do create a few mixed quizzes. Don't just take a mock with 36 questions. Create a mixed quiz with about 15 to 18 questions where you have, 2 RCs and a few SCs and CRs, so that your brain can do context switching more or less seamlessly. Because otherwise, if your brain is not in the habit of doing context switching, you might end up faltering. How do you deal with exam dinners? Do exam readiness. That's what I would say. And I can tell you how do you do exam readiness. And this is something that we tell our students to do. Let me share. Here's an overarching video that talks about test readiness that you can take a look at and learn from. What platform will help you create a mixed bag of questions? Scholarium does that. To a certain extent, I think GMAT club tests also do that. So yeah. All right, guys. With that, I want to thank you guys for joining me today. I love your questions. I love that you guys did really well in the second passage, and I look forward to seeing you in our future webinars or on e-GMAT.com. Thank you very much, and have a great day.